I'm also a very big fan of our next speaker, who is going to come and close us out and wish us well for the day, Judge EFinn. She has a beautiful bio in your packet that I'm not going to read through, but as many of you all know, she is the judge for the city of Glendale. We had the honor to begin working together. I don't even know what year, but it was a few years ago, a few jobs ago, and I had the pleasure to co-chair a task force under the Sandra Day O'Connor House, and Judge Finn was part of that task force, and she's been on it for a while. And what I learned through the year and a half of working with Judge Finn, when we started, we had a goal of changing the world and changing the system, and Judge says, well, we've tried this before, it didn't work, but if you bring everybody to the table and they keep working on it, then okay, we're gonna do it and we'll get it done. And I like I said, it was a few jobs ago, I was kind of new at this whole, like, how do we change the system, especially on the legislative level? Like, really, you go down and you can get something changed in a statute? I thought that only happened to, I don't know, those people downtown. And it worked. We changed the statute. We made a better life for victims of domestic violence. We changed training for law enforcement, and we created a whole new path. And Judge Finn has inspired me from then on out that if you just try to pull your people together, the people at your table are your best allies, whether they're way up here behind the bench or the folks out at the field. We all need each other. And so with that, thank you, Judge Finn, for many years of cheering us all on.
Well, thank you, Bea, and thank you, Brett. But I will tell you, I feel very insignificant after listening to this panel. I don't know how anybody could not be inspired by the collective partnerships that they've been able to form. I'm sitting here thinking of what I've done in Glendale, going, nothing compared to what they've done in these other jurisdictions. You know, I was appointed a judge in 1979. I always did a lot of teaching when I was in private practice. And so that was one of the first things that happened to me, even as a new judge, is all of a sudden the Supreme Court's asking me to teach this, that, and whatever. Well, most people know me for my 30-plus years of passion concerning domestic violence. But I was one of those judges, when I first started out, said, you know, why are these people bothering this? Why are they calling the police and wasting their time? Why are these cases coming to court and then the victims don't show up? It's just a waste of everybody's time, until the Supreme Court said, we're doing a breakout session at the Judicial Conference on Domestic Violence with the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and we can't get a judge to work with them. Will you do it? I said, sure, I'll do it. That's all it took, was that one collaboration with the coalition where they're trying to explain the scenario of what really happens in a domestic violence relationship. And all of a sudden, it's like, what are we doing in the system? We're victimizing these victims all over again, from the police to the prosecutors to the courts. We are absolutely not just part of the problem, but we're enhancing the problem and making it worse. From there, we went on to identifying, you know, who's who in Glendale, and that's in Phoenix. You know, who's working on this in the prosecutor's office, who's working on this in the police department, who's working on this in terms of the provider. What does the provider actually do? That we order people to counseling all the time, but we have no idea what they're actually doing. So then we're looking at the statutes and we're going, we're not following the statutes. The prosecutors aren't following the statutes. The judges aren't following the statutes. The police aren't following the statutes. So all of a sudden we start doing some training. And then there's a major initiative that happens in 1993 where there's many different entities that are pulled together at the Supreme Court. They're working on different things involving families. and I was involved with the one with domestic violence. And we came up with all these things that we wanted to do. And we did our major report back, and then it just sat there. And I'm going, no, this isn't gonna just sit there. So again, reaching out to the different disciplines. Bea is right, I've been at the legislature many times. I do not have to sign in as a lobbyist because I'm a judge and I'm there for the administration of justice. So I go back to the Supreme Court and say, we just worked a year coming up with what we think are changes that need to be made to the domestic violence statute and the protective order statutes. And we've got the prosecutors, we've got the police on board, and we've got the advocacy groups on board. And they said, okay, we'll support it. And all of a sudden, so the mandatory DV arrest statute, yeah, you can blame me and that group for that in 1993. I still think it's valid. So, you know, one of the things that happened was we had an ethics opinion that came out that said judges could not be involved in any group that endorsed a protocol. So all of us involved in DV had to resign from every single commission or committee that we're on that was engaged in any kind of protocol. So we went to the Supreme Court and said, if you won't let us be on any of these committees, then you need to go form a committee to deal with this. And that's how the Committee on the Impact of Domestic Violence in the Courts was formed in 1994. And then, you know, you gotta be careful what you ask for, because all of a sudden I'm now chair of this, right? And you know, that same thing goes on where I wrote a letter to the Chief Justice identifying all the issues and the problems I saw in the area of domestic violence. And so he writes back saying, well, then do something about it. And took 3 years, but we came out with the first bench book on domestic violence and protective orders. And I could keep going on about domestic violence, but the most important part about it is that I found my passion. And this is more than 20 years ago. I mean, so Bea talks a few years ago. I think it's more like a few decades ago. Tracy Wilkinson sitting here from Scottsdale, we met over domestic violence scenarios. And there were a lot of us that met in the domestic violence arena. And you know, it was one of those things where it just took one thing, going to that breakout and forming that breakout for one conference, for me to find my passion. And that was domestic violence. So I go to Glendale. One of the first things I do is I start looking at the demographics of the defendants that we have in Glendale. And unlike Phoenix, where I was a judge for 24 years, we have more domestic violence cases than we have DUIs. I'm going, okay, we've got a different scenario going on here. What are we doing to track them? Well, I had a victim send a letter one day complaining that her significant other was not getting the counseling, had been convicted of domestic violence, and nothing was happening. So I trace it back to the file room and say, okay, where is this person's file? So they bring me the file. I'm looking at the file. There's nothing in it. And I said, well, where does information about non-compliance from the provider go? And they go, oh, it's in the alphabetizer. So I go to the alphabetizer, and I go and I pull out the form, and I look at it, and it's 4 weeks old. So I say to the staff person, how come this is still in here after 4 weeks? That's too long. And they said, oh no, that's not bad at all for us. And I'm going, okay, let's go back to the most important thing that we need to do with people in this scenario is get them into counseling and have the support behind that to make sure that they get the counseling as soon as it's identified. And I'm sorry, 4 weeks sitting in an alphabetizer, that doesn't cut it. So all of a sudden, you know, we're gonna set up a domestic violence court. You don't have any money to do it, but you know what? You don't need money. You don't need extra people. You just need somebody with passion and somebody with a little bit of creativity. The other thing is you've got to identify the other people around the table. My judges thought a domestic violence court was a waste of time. My staff thought it was a waste of time. The prosecutor thought it was a waste of time. I'm dragging them to different meetings, to different conferences, and saying, you know, we need to do something like this. And we did start that in 2005 without one extra dime. It's still going today. I will tell you that one of the best things that I ever learned how to do was write a grant. And when I am in different jurisdictions and people find out I need to apply for grants and then manage them from a monetary standpoint. I mean, if you've done one, you know, you can figure it out. And so yes, I did end up with 4 consecutive VAWA grants. We grew our domestic violence program, and for our little town of Glendale with 240,000 people, I brought in $1.5 million in 4 different VAWA grants. But our program was there and it was sustained. So in 2012, what happens is the money for Rule 11 competency exams is in the court budget. Don't ask me why, but that's where it is. And it was going from $15,000 to $35,000 in 1 year. And I thought, well, I guess I better go look at some mental health courts. So I go look at Tempe and I see their model and go, oh, okay. And then I go and look at Phoenix's model, and it's not the same model it is now. It was with a different judge and a different concept. I'm going, no, I don't think that's gonna work. And then we go back to Tempe, but what really did it is we were able to do an extract of 4 years of defendants out of our case management system to Shelley Curran, and Shelley then matched it against defendants and against clients who were in her system that had already been diagnosed SMI. The high year we had out of the 4 years is we had 246 defendants that were the same. And she went, we need to start something in Glendale like right now. You have a huge SMI population there and they're not being served. And I said, but I don't know anything about a mental health court. She goes, you'll figure it out, okay? And I will tell you, to say that we asked questions would be an understatement. It's a total different land of terminology, and even though we've had it going for 4.5 years, yesterday I had to ask what an acronym meant because I didn't know what it meant. And what I found is, again, you don't need money. You just need passion and somebody who really cares. Because in 4.5 years, well, let me just start with, I gotta do some shout outs here. Jennifer Dalton started off as a regular public defender. I made her the mental health public defender. Kathy Williams is a court program coordinator for mental health court, homeless court, Rule 11s. Karen Nicely started with this in January as a public defender. I'll get to that in a second. But what happened is Kathy was a lead clerk. And I said to Kathy, you're already dealing with the jail, you're already tracking Rule 11s, I'm gonna pull you over here and have you do this new court we're gonna start called mental health court. I went to Jennifer and said, Jennifer, you have some mental health background. We're gonna drop some of your pretrials, but I'm gonna have you just work 2 afternoons a month on pretrials and 2 afternoons a month, and we're gonna do a mental health court. So we start, and so we got to the point of staffing started at 1:30 and court was supposed to start at 3. And then staffing had to start at 1 because the volume was too heavy. And then staffing had to start at 12:30 because the volume was too heavy. And that's when we said, okay, that's it. Something's going on. So again, I'm reaching out to Shelley Curran going, what is going on here with this volume? The increase is killing us here. And what she sent to me is in April of last year, there was one particular zip code, which is downtown Glendale, going toward the south, where there's a lot of multi-family housing, subsidized housing. And that zip code, and we certainly had an increase in homeless population also, but it was in the 600s in April of last year. In October of last year, it was in the 800s. The next nearest zip code in Glendale was in the 200s. So at that point, yes, I did finally have to go ask for more money. And in the middle of the budget year, the city attorney and I went to the city manager and said, I need to have mental health court go weekly, like right now. And in addition to that, he needs a prosecutor and I need a half-time public defender. And everybody said, you're crazy, you'll never get it. We got it. We started on January 11th. So my message to all of you is, for 4.5 years, we did mental health court without one extra dime. You don't need money to get things done. You only need one passionate person. That's what it comes down to. Somebody said it before, if you have a judge call a meeting, people will come. I hate to say it, that's true. So tag a judge and get them involved. And again, from the domestic violence arena, the strongest strength we always said we had was passion. The strongest strength we have in the mental health arena is passion. So don't be frustrated with no resources and no money. Use your passion to make it happen.